Hi, and thanks for tuning in to another of our Total Success training videos. This is part 2 of performance management. We have already done part 1. You may have seen this on our website, and I hope that it's something which gave you an insight. We'll be covering some of those areas in relation to part 1. But really in part 2, we had some very good questions which came from part 1, so which we thought we'd extend in terms of performance management. We didn't realise just how many questions that people would have, so we've actually condensed quite a few down, and we put together some more slides and some more information about performance management. We will be going over some of the things that we covered before, and our objectives for you forward were for you to understand the essentials of good performance management. Now, myself, I've been training for over 30 years. I used to be a training manager for a large publishing organisation, and I've been working with lots of organisations over many years, teaching and coaching people in the art and skill of performance. I was actually a sales director, so performance was something which was absolutely essential in the role which I did. And getting people to understand what performance management is all about. Now, if you remember from the last video that we did, we talked about what you need to think about into performance management. What is performance management? How can we manage performance effectively? Now, we had quite a few questions about that on very specific types of businesses as well, different types of roles such as sales, role, finance, even down to, we had a few questions in terms of operations. Some interesting questions came in from somebody who was talking about warehousing. How do you manage that? Well, it's all about really trying to manage those areas' performance effectively, but a few questions which need answers is what performance is required. To manage performance, you've got to know what performance is. We talked about that, and we'll go over a few things as we go through the seminar today. You need to be able to think about what is required in terms of performance. If you don't know what the factors are, then how can you manage anything? You've got to know how to break it down, what the factors are, what you're expecting of people as well. And there's a very simple area we need to think about in relation to this. If you think about any form of the jobs that your team do, you have to think, well, what is required of them? That needs a breakdown. To do that, you also need to think about what is the current level of performance being achieved. Now, you cannot say what the current levels are until you know what performance is. Performance needs to be measured, so it has to be something quantitative. And if you remember from the last video, we talked about quantitative performance, volume of output, speed of output. If you're working in a factory, volume and speed are very important, but anything which involves output in relation to productivity. We're talking about productivity is what you do within a given time frame. So that gives you, if you're a bricklayer, how many bricks you would lay in a day. If you're a salesperson, how many accounts that you would sell in a week. Production deadlines. Again, if you work in a factory, they would have your production deadlines. They may shift depending upon the type of work that you do, the orders that you've got in. They could have direct financial indices. In sales, you have sales volume, but that might also be in finance where you're in credit control, so you have clients that you need to contact and monies that you need to recoup. There can also be quality factors in terms of performance, the level of how much you achieve within a given time period. If you're talking about quality, if you are working in a design outfit, the creative output that you have would be determined by maybe if you're in fashion industry, the garments you produce. If you're in the creative industries, such as video games or something like that, then obviously that would have something to do with how the games are produced, how the output is produced in terms of this software as well. Also time factors, how much we do in a time period. You can't say somebody is hitting a deadline or missing a deadline unless you can put it into some sort of productivity focus. So we're talking about what we call quantitative performance. But the qualitative, as we mentioned before, are the behaviours which drive that performance level. How to work in a team, how to communicate, how to be creative, how to organise yourselves, how much attention to detail. And we came down to even things such as how hard working does a person need to be, timekeeping, communication skills, problem solving, decision making. These are what we call behavioural qualitative skills, but they drive the quantitative. Kind of one without the other, as we say. So, if you've set your performance measures, let me give you an example from my current industry, in the training industry. I will be targeted to speak to a number of clients. I will have appointments in a month. I will be targeted to see how many of those clients that I visit and the conversion rate. So we're not just talking about quantity factors, we're talking about quality factors as well. We're talking about output. Well, what do I do in that time? Well, obviously, there's research which needs to be done, there's information, there's communication, there's liaison, there's lots of factors that I have to be able to put into place to have the meetings and to be able to satisfy the client's needs so that ultimately they book up for the training courses which we have. So my performance can be measured over a number of areas there. And that's just one area of my performance. We're talking about being a trainer as well. As a trainer, I have to be able to be able to train courses, be up on the material, to be competent, to be confident, to be analysed and audited, so that I am getting a high score on my training courses. Again, lots of quantitative factors, but driven by a desire, an ability to communicate, ability to organise, to be able to get to courses on time, to be able to run them effectively. So lots of behavioural factors drive the qualitative. If you want to manage your performance, you've got to know what it is. Now, if you're going to now move from just the quantitative and the analysis of that, then you've got to be able to have a performance meeting with somebody. And we talked about having a performance meeting. In terms of this, if you're having a one-to-one with somebody, the first thing you do is set up the meeting and you'd review the previous results. What was the person expected to have produced? Was it the normal? If you're in sales or in finance, you'll have whatever targets that you've been set for the previous month. You'll review those targets, how well you did. What are the factors which affected those particular targets? What are the productivity? What's the data of those? From that, then you set future objectives. Now, very important when you set future objectives that you agree priorities for those objectives. One of the areas of research that I sometimes quote is the fact that there's between a manager setting a priority and a staff member understand what a priority is. On average, there's 25% difference between the two. And that was back in research that was done by Arkansas University. So if there's a 25% difference, what's the difference? Well, the difference is generally communication. We have to be able to communicate and set priorities. And both parties need to understand what those priorities are. Those priorities need to be agreed, and they need to be written, and they need to be followed through. Now, the follow through is something which is very important for performance. Do you set a target and then just let somebody go with it? No, you don't. What you do is you will have one-to-ones, you'll have data which comes through to assess that, so you know exactly where that person should be. If you set a target and you have no idea what the person is producing, what they're doing, what the outputs are, then really you're setting meaningless targets. And if I were to give you some advice, don't set meaningless targets. Don't set targets without some sort of quantifiable follow-up procedure. Because if you do, what you're doing there is you're just having a meeting and discussing issues, but without actually a reference towards productivity, issues which matter to both parties. So you need to be able to think about this. And some of the things we're going to talk about, because we had a few questions about, well, what do we do in the meeting? Well, there are a number of factors you have to think about. What were last time's objectives? What supporting facts and data do you have to confirm the level of performance actually achieved? Now, you need something to allow you to be able to say, you did well, this was going to plan, we need to improve upon this. So one of the first things about having performance is having performance measures. What measures do you have? Do you have units per hour? Do you have output per month? Do you have customers per quarter? What sort of output measures do you have? Now, what are the factors which affected employees' performance? Somebody working very hard in a tough environment will have lower figures than in a higher environment. Currently, at the moment, in schools, auditing schools in the UK, they're looking not so much at exam results as per whether that school is a good school, but a quality of teaching, the way in which that school teaches, because it could be in a very tough area where they're actually teaching absolute excellence in terms of teaching, but because of the nature of the area, the performance will not be as good as a more affluent area. So you need to think about what affects employees' performance. What should the next objectives be? And how realistic are they? Now that should come from an agreement between both the manager and the employee. And what support will they need? Now, if you set a quantitative set of agreements, then that gives you an opportunity to think about what the employee needs to do to achieve that. Then, what sort of support and feedback is necessary for them to achieve that? Support and feedback, absolutely essential. to give somebody a target without any form of feedback, i.e. how they're doing. And if you remember from the previous video we did, we talked about Bandura's experiment where Olympic cyclists were given opportunity for no feedback, no set objectives, or given feedback and objectives. And the ones who were given feedback and objectives, their performance doubled those who were only given feedback or just set objectives. So it's important that you give the employee feedback, and from feedback it should allow you to be able to think about what you need to do to support that person. Do they need training? Do they need coaching? Do they need materials? Do they need facilities? Do they need more time? Now, there's a number of factors you have to think about, but if you are not giving the person support, you're setting somebody off without the necessary conditions to be able to do the job you want them to do. And if you come back to the original thing about performance, you've got to know what the performance is before you can do that. So what support will they need? You need to be able to ask questions, and good open questions in a performance review allows you to be able to find out what's going on. What were the factors that made the difference? How does the employee feel about that? What will they be doing next? What support will they need? Or what, when, where, how, who and why questions. Ask lots of open and probing questions. You'll also need to ask a few close questions as well, but just to confirm an agreement. So if we did this, if I helped you with that and gave you the training on this particular area, you'd be able to succeed in this area. Am I right? Am I right? Closed question, yes and no. That allows you to consolidate where you are and then move on to the next part. So good open questions, good probing questions, and good closing questions as well. Now, if you're talking about feedback, breakfast of champions, as they say. But if you're going to have a performance meeting, one of the things that we always encourage people to do is don't give your feedback first. We always encourage what we call self-criticism, self-critique, if you call it. Always ask somebody how they feel they did on a particular area. How are you doing on that? What do you feel about this? What's happening with this area? Ask questions first before you give your feedback. Your feedback can come at any time. But make sure you ask the questions. Make sure your feedback is helpful. Nobody wants to be criticised all the way through a meeting. You want them to walk out being more motivated than they were when they walked in. So be specific on the areas that you're criticising and praising, and concentrate on areas in which they can do something about. There is no point in criticising somebody over something that they cannot affect themselves. So be selective in what you choose, and always be forward-looking. As a trained mediator and a conflict manager, one of the things which I always say when you're managing conflicts, you've got to be able to move into the future, dictate where the next step will be. The same with performance management. A lot of people may not understand how to achieve the performance, which is where the breakdown, the communication, the setting the objectives, the support and the feedback actually allow you to understand whether that person is competent and also capable of achieving what you need them to achieve. So there are lots of factors we have to think about in terms of giving feedback and setting objectives. One last thing I want to finish off today, though, is praise. Praise is a fantastic tool. Not always used as well as it should be in modern business, but it's something which we need to think about. What sort of praise we need to do. Now, if you're going to do praise, there are 6 areas that you want to think about within praise. Number 1, praise a specific area of work or behaviour. Don't praise the individual. You can say what you liked about something, and if you say, I like the way in which you did this, then what you're doing is praising what the person did, not the actual person. But do say why you liked it, because it reinforces the actual relationship between you. You are the manager, they are the subordinate, and you're actually giving them a bit of praise about what the person who is above them actually thinks about what they did. I particularly like the way you did that. Proud of you for doing that, so tell them why you want them. Now, again, this is a thing where you need to move on to, again, another factor. Don't just praise the individual and make it seem insincere. Don't just tell them what they did, but also give them some wider impacts. The reason I like this is because it enables us to do that. People understand that. It shows that you're moving forward. Put it into context. That way people can see the praise is actually specific. Express your confidence they can do it again. Everybody likes to know that people have confidence in them and trust in them. With this, you can actually follow through on another request. Once it's at this stage, if you're praising well, the person will be more likely to give you something back. It's really behavioural reciprocation, we call this. But let the person know that you respect them, you value them, and are more willing to engage in greater elements of work. Can I ask you to do that? Can we improve that? More likely to involve in there, because now they're feeling good about about you, the relationship, and what they've done. And always finish off the meeting on an uplifting and motivational note. No point starting all this off and thinking and saying to them, but you better do this because. No, show your confidence in them. Show that you're pleased with what they produced. And the emotional factors in terms of performance cannot be underestimated. I might know what to do, but if I know what to do and I know that I have got the backing of my boss, both in terms of work and in terms of the way in which he or she sees me, then that actually makes me want to work much harder. I will enjoy the work. I won't stress out from the work as well. So there we are. We've covered a number of factors in relation to performance management. What it is, how to measure it, the factors you need to take into account, how to have the meeting, how to set objectives, how to give feedback, and how to praise. Now, if you have any further questions, please contact us. Our website is www.totalsuccess.co.uk. I'll repeat that, www.totalsuccess, all one word, .co.uk. You can speak to any of us. Ask us a question. If you like what you hear and you'd like to engage us for consultancy, we're more than happy to talk to you about that as well. As I said, I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you picked up some good tips, some good strategies, some good tactics, but more importantly, I hope it enables you to manage performance much better than you could actually 15 minutes ago. Thank you for your time, and I hope to speak to you again on one of our other Total Success training videos.